It all happened in a heartbeat. The streets of downtown Chicago buzzed with the rush of morning traffic. Horns honked, coffee cups jostled in hurried hands, and the scent of bagels and exhaust filled the air. Among the bustle walked Jake Donovan, a single dad of 29, balancing a diaper bag on one shoulder and his 8-month-old daughter, Ellie, in his arms. He was tired, more than tired. He hadn't slept more than 3 hours in a row since Ellie was born, and the circles under his eyes told the story no words ever could. But he was here, alive, present, and doing his best. He had promised his late wife, Mira, that he would be both mother and father to their child, even if it meant carrying her to every job interview and navigating this fast world with a bottle in one pocket and a pacifier in the other. Today, he was en route to a temporary agency to pick up weekend work. Ellie nestled against his chest in a pink onesie, her tiny fingers curled around his hoodie string. Just another normal morning, until the scream cut through the noise. Across the crosswalk, a man stumbled out of a delivery truck, clutching his chest, collapsing onto the pavement. Pedestrians froze, gasped, scattered. Some pulled out phones. Others backed away. Jake didn't think, he moved. "Someone call 911, he shouted as he jogged toward the man. But as he reached him, a terrible realization struck. He couldn't do much with a baby in his arms. That's when he saw her. A young woman, maybe late 20s, standing at the edge of the sidewalk, eyes wide, hands trembling. A total stranger. But something in her gaze wasn't panic, it was readiness. Without pausing, Jake rushed over to her, his heart pounding. "Please," he said, breathless. "Hold my baby. Just for a second." Before she could answer, he gently but urgently placed Ellie into her arms. The woman caught the baby instinctively, startled, but didn't pull away. Her eyes locked on Jake as he turned and knelt beside the injured man, checking his pulse, his breath, his eyes. Jake wasn't a doctor, but he'd taken CPR training after Mira died. He had to. Life had taught him not to wait for heroes. Sometimes, you have to become one. The man was going into cardiac arrest. Jake performed chest compressions. The minutes stretched long and terrible. A crowd gathered. Sirens howled in the distance. Sweat poured down his face. The man's chest heaved, coughed. He was breathing. Paramedics arrived, took over. Jake fell back on the pavement, breathless, his hands shaking. He turned, and then remembered. Ellie. He scrambled to his feet, eyes darting through the crowd, and there she was. The woman still stood where he'd left her, clutching Ellie gently against her chest, her eyes glistening. Jake rushed to her. "She's okay," the woman said softly before he could even speak. She didn't cry once. Jake exhaled a shaky breath, reaching for his daughter. "Thank you," he said, emotion choking his voice. He took Ellie back into his arms. But something had shifted in that moment. Not just gratitude, but something deeper, more fragile. They stood there for a moment. Strangers surrounded by chaos, yet wrapped in a strange kind of calm. "I'm Leah," she said, brushing a wisp of baby hair from Ellie's forehead. "Jake," he replied. "And this is Ellie." Leah smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "She's beautiful." Jake nodded, unsure what else to say. The ambulance pulled away. The crowd dispersed. But Leah didn't. "You're doing this alone?" she asked gently, noticing the diaper bag, the bottle poking out of the side pocket. Jake gave a small, tired nod. "Since she was 2 weeks old." Leah's breath caught. She looked down. "I lost my baby 6 months ago. Stillborn." Silence fell. Jake felt it like a weight. Not awkward, but reverent. "I'm so sorry," he said. "It's okay," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything." And then, with a voice barely audible over the noise of the city, she asked, "Can I hold her again?" Jake looked into her eyes, and something in him said yes. Ellie went easily into Leah's arms, as if she sensed something, as if she knew. Leah held her close, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. It was a connection neither of them expected. A moment shared between two broken hearts. Jake didn't know what made him do it. Exhaustion, instinct, or something else. But he invited Leah to sit with them at a nearby bench. And there, under the soft hum of city life, he told her about Mira, about their love, the cancer that took her, the promise he made to never let Ellie grow up feeling unloved. Leah listened without interrupting. She told him about her fiancé, a firefighter who left after the loss of their baby. Too much pain, too little healing. And by the time they stood to leave, the sun had shifted in the sky. Jake cleared his throat. "Thank you for helping me help someone else." Leah gave a small smile. "Maybe that's what we're all here for. To help each other breathe again." They exchanged numbers, not out of politeness, but out of something neither could name yet. Jake didn't expect to hear from her. But 2 days later, Leah showed up outside his apartment with a second-hand stroller, a tiny pair of shoes, and homemade soup. She said she just wanted to help. Jake let her in. And that's where the second chapter begins. The days that followed Leah's first visit felt like sunlight slowly creeping into a dark, dusty room. She didn't come every day, and when she did, she never stayed long. But she always brought something small, a pack of wipes, a soft blanket, a storybook she said she used to read aloud to her belly during those fleeting 9 months. Jake noticed how Ellie smiled when Leah entered. It wasn't the startled curiosity she had for new people. It was calm, familiar. As if even at 8 months old, Ellie could sense a soul who had loved deeply and lost deeply, like her dad. Jake tried not to read into it. Life had taught him not to get too hopeful. His only focus had been keeping Ellie fed, warm, and safe. His own heart was buried somewhere beneath months of grief and formula bottles. But Leah, she brought something unexpected. Ease. Not the romantic kind at first. It was simpler than that. She folded onesies without being asked. She watched Ellie for 20 minutes so Jake could take a real shower, one with hot water and music. And when Ellie started teething and cried through the night, Leah sat on the floor beside Jake with a wet rag and sang lullabies in a voice that cracked but never gave up. Jake found himself listening for the knock on the door more and more. It wasn't just that Leah helped. It was the way she looked at Ellie, as if she mattered, deeply, fully, to someone other than her dad. And it was the way she looked at Jake, not with pity, not with admiration, but with the gentle strength of someone who knew pain and still chose to love anyway. They never labeled it. There were no confessions, no dates. Just a growing closeness, like a song building in the background of their days. Until one rainy evening, everything changed. Jake had picked up a part-time gig loading trucks at a shipping center overnight. He hated leaving Ellie, but Leah had offered to stay, just for the night, and he'd agreed. When he returned home at 4 a.m., soaked to the bone, he opened the apartment door slowly. The lights were low, soft lullaby music hummed from a speaker, and in the corner of the room, he saw Leah curled on the couch, Ellie sleeping on her chest like she had always belonged there. He stood there, frozen, and that's when Leah woke. Her eyes met his, vulnerable, wide, and yet unafraid. She sat up slowly, brushing Ellie's wispy hair. She cried for a while, Leah said softly. "But I think she's starting to trust me." Jake stepped forward, exhausted but captivated by the picture they made. "You didn't have to stay up." "I didn't want to miss a moment," she whispered. A silence stretched between them, full, electric. Then, Leah looked down at Ellie, kissed her forehead, and gently whispered the words Jake never expected to hear. "Jake, can I be her mom?" The world seemed to still. Jake's breath caught. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For months, he'd buried his heart in routine and survival. The idea of more, of a family again, felt like betrayal, like temptation, like hope. "She already has a mom," Jake said quietly. "Mira, I know," Leah said gently. "And she always will. I could never replace her, Jake. But maybe Ellie could have 2 moms. One who brought her into this world with all her heart, and one who found her when she needed another." Tears filled Jake's eyes. He sank onto the couch beside Leah, his head in his hands. I don't know how to do this, he confessed. I don't know if I'm ready. Leah placed a hand on his knee. Neither am I. But love doesn't wait for us to be ready. It just shows up, and we choose what we do with it. Jake turned his head. Ellie stirred in Leah's arms and smiled in her sleep. He remembered Myra's final days, the way she whispered, "Promise me she'll never feel alone," and the way he nodded through sobs, not knowing how he'd ever manage that. But now, here was Leah, a stranger once, who had held Ellie before she even knew Jake's name, who had stepped into the fire of grief and offered nothing but kindness. Maybe it wasn't too early. Maybe it was just the beginning. Jake reached for Leah's hand and held it tightly. "You already are," he whispered. She looked up, confused. "What? You're already her mom," he said, his voice breaking. "You've loved her like she was yours from the second I handed her to you. And I think she'd be okay with this." Leah broke into quiet tears, clutching Ellie closer. From that day on, things changed, gently, beautifully. There was no rush, no sudden titles or wedding bells, just a new kind of rhythm, the kind that plays when hearts heal together. Leah moved in 6 months later, not to replace, but to build. She and Jake made mistakes, fought over nap schedules, got formula brands wrong, burnt dinner, and laughed over cereal bowls. But Ellie, she thrived. She had a mom and dad again, two people who loved her with everything they had. And every once in a while, when people asked how they met, Jake would smile and say, "She was a stranger I handed my baby to, so I could save a man's life. I didn't know she'd end up saving ours." And Leah would lean in, kiss Ellie's cheek, and whisper the same words she said that very first night. "Can I be her mom?" And every day since, she was.